Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you cruise a little smarter, and I'd like to welcome back to the show all the way down in Florida. She's got me up early. How you doing today, Christy?
I'm well, Steve. How are you? But you're keeping me up late tonight, so we're even.
Yeah, we're burning a candle at both ends, I guess is what they say, right?
Yes.
Well, we've got a fun show today. We're going to talk about Marvel Day at Sea on the Disney Dream, and I'm going to let you introduce our guest because you were so gracious to bring her on, and I'm really excited to bring her on the podcast today.
Man, I should be prepared because you do this every time, and yet never one time am I prepared. Okay. Our guest today is a contributor with Touring Plans, and the reason that I wanted her on is because her brain is such a, well, she said she's an engineer, and I think that says everything, or an engineer by trade. She is a person who's trying to maximize your Disney cruise experience, and so I think that she is the perfect guest for us. So her Instagram handle is Raising Mini Me's, and I'd like to welcome to the show, Becky.
Yay, thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure having you with us today, Becky, and excited to hear about your cruise on the Disney Dream, especially the Marvel Day at Sea. But before we jump into it, give us a little bit about your Disney background. How'd you get to work for Touring Plans, and give us a little bit of your Disney cruising background?
Right? Touring Plans, dream side gig right there. Disney background, I grew up, so I live in St. Louis, have lived here all of my life. My family grew up taking lots of vacations, which I appreciate, especially now as an adult. But once every 3 years, we would go to Disney World and just always loved Disney, the parks, the movies, everything about it. So when I married my husband, we've been married for 10 years now, hooray, big milestone. He had only been to Disney World once ever, and it was when he was 5, so it had been a while. His only memory from that trip was that he was too short for Space Mountain. That was the only, nothing else stuck with him. So I was like, we have to go. And as I was planning that first trip, which was our first anniversary trip, I found Touring Plans, and it was the perfect site for me because they use data to reduce your wait times, avoid crowds, all of that really important and fun stuff. So I started using it as a product, and then eventually, after a couple of years, Len Testa, who owns and runs the company, on his podcast, on the blog, he would start putting out data and be like, if anyone wants to play with this, go for it. And I think the one that I latched onto was Be Our Guest satisfaction for that restaurant in the Magic Kingdom, and I emailed him something back and said, here's what I found, and he thought that was cool. He talked about it on the Disney Dish, and so then I started just helping out with little side projects whenever he had data that no one had time for. That transitioned into blogging and now YouTubing and all of the fun stuff. So now I get to just dig in that Disney data all the time, which I would gladly do for free because it's fascinating and you can learn so much. And so then I have my Instagram mainly to use that data to provide tips to families with young kids about how to get the most for their money and to have the most enjoyable time with those young kids on every kind of Disney trip, including cruising.
And that's why I reached out to say, hey, would you like to record with us? Because I think these tidbits are so useful, and I love having them in one spot so somebody can come back and listen and, figure out, let's maximize our Disney cruise with young kids, still making it fun because we can't just be, jumping from point to point without ever enjoying it. Like kids have to be kids and doing their kid things, but how can we do that in the best way possible? And I love this kind of stuff.
Yay, good.
So it sounds like the perfect sandbox for you, the data sandbox that Len and Touring Plans provided. We've never really talked about it because I get the idea of, data and how fast lines move and the best way to move yourself through the parks. How have you been able to use that with your cruise planning?
Yeah, so several ways. A lot of it has to do with not even necessarily the data, but the strategies that the data informs that are the same on a cruise as they are at Disney World, as they are at a national, like humans behave the same no matter where they're vacationing. And so you can kind of think your way around things. This was especially true. Our previous cruises had not had any special themes. They were just pretty normal. We like repositioning cruises the best, actually. Those sea days are great for young kids. So this is the first one where we had Marvel Day at Sea. And that is totally jam-packed, and we can talk about that more. But going into that, you don't couldn't plan for this in advance at all. It was literally the second offering that had ever happened on the Disney Dream. And the other one was the week before when I happened to be speaking at a conference and traveling, so I couldn't follow what was happening on that first cruise. So we don't have any idea of the schedule of what's actually being offered until we get on the ship and open the Navigator app. So I have, because it was on the second full day, I have essentially one full day to try to plan out what our day is going to look like, which I enjoyed doing. But going into it with prior knowledge of people are going to sleep in. If there's 3 or more showings, the middle one's probably going to be the least crowded, etc. And trying to piece all that together using my Disney World knowledge and previous cruising knowledge really helped us make the most of that day without totally wearing our children out and making them miserable by dragging them from line to line to line.
So I'm just going to throw this out there. Our latest cruise we did on the Fantasy, which was a 7 day. So we've been on it before. We don't need to be on it we don't need to be the first family on board.
Yep.
So we got there at 12:45 and there was nobody in line.
Yeah.
We walked through the lines. We walked through the terminal, got on the ship. It was totally relaxing. By the time we got up to Cabanas, because that's what we do, it was busy, but it was easy to find a table. It was a very relaxing experience. Now, following along with everybody on Facebook from our cruise group and how crazy it was, everybody getting on at 10:30, 11 o'clock, whenever they started that boarding and opened up those doors, it made it a much more relaxing experience. So I totally appreciate what you're talking about, just using, do I say common sense, or not common sense, but understanding how people move or what people's desires are from past experiences to make your experience a little bit more enjoyable, possibly.
Yes. It's interesting. You talk about being first on board. So our last 2 cruises, we've been selected as family of the day, which is statistically really improbable. So we got to be the first family on board on the Wonder this past November, and then the Dream in January for the Marvel Day at Sea cruise. So yay, that made our experience great. I also, we can get into the data of this too. I do the online check-in and I know how long it's going to be frustrating for, and I wait to get on until most of the people have given up. And so I get boarding group 3 every time, which is great because it's right after those concierge and platinum guests, which we are not. And so then we don't have to wait very long, but we get to the terminal right when our arrival time is, because I know we're going to be waiting some anyway. But the number of people, especially in Miami, they kept things a little tighter in San Diego because it's a much smaller terminal. There were people in boarding group 16 in line right ahead of us. And I'm like, you're going to be sitting in that terminal for hours. There aren't even vending machines. Your kids are going to be hungry and cranky. And I get wanting, but pay attention to your boarding group and your arrival time, because just arriving earlier isn't going to get you on the ship any earlier. And there were a lot of tired and cranky kids in that terminal. It takes time to turn those ships around. So, yeah.
For sure. And let's go back to the beginning. How did you get to the port?
How did we get to the port? We Ubered. Okay. So we flew down to Miami the night before, stayed at a hotel near the airport, and then just Ubered that morning. I believe we aimed to get there about 15 minutes before our port arrival time, and that worked perfectly.
That's great. And I don't think we've mentioned on this podcast yet, who traveled with you?
Oh, yeah. My family traveled with me. So we're a family of lovely little redheads. My husband, Jeff is his name, and then my 2 daughters, who were 6 and 4 at the time, Edith and Louise. So we had a lot of people that didn't want to Uber on our Facebook group for the cruise because they had small kids. My kids are just big enough that we have things called bubble bums that we fly down with, and they meet the weight requirements for, and they deflate and pack very easily in our luggage, and then we re-inflate them anytime we're about to get in an Uber, and it keeps them that much safer anyway.
Yep.
So.
Yep. We use those as well. My son was first rated to fit into them based on the European standards, which I'm pretty sure I followed, because when he was 3, I still needed him to be able to have a car seat and have something that was convenient. So we will, if Steve remembers to get it from me, I will give him a link. We'll put it in the show notes, or you can reach out to me after and I can get you a link for them. They are amazing. They're like $30 on Amazon and fit in your backpack.
Right. Love the bubble gums. So that's how we got to port that morning.
Before we get to the cruise, I want one more thing. How did you get picked for the family of the day? Because I don't think we've discussed that on the show before.
Yeah. So family of the day is a pretty reliable format, no matter what your terminal, no matter what your ship. Now, the things that you get differ, I've learned, but there's one employee in each port that their main job is to select and then oversee management of the family of the day. And it's usually someone in the first 4 boarding groups, because those get to usually sit in a different room than everyone else or closer to where you actually board the ship. You can't be concierge. They usually don't pick platinum people. So it helps if you're there early, you have that early port arrival time, because they're not going to pick someone that's not there when the ship's ready. It helps if you have cute matching outfits, I've learned. And it is called Family of the Day. So I've had several people on Instagram be like, well, we're childless adults. So usually, yes, it will involve children because they get to run to Captain Mickey on the ship. And this is great photo opportunities for everyone. So my family, we've gotten boarding group 3 each time that we were selected. And we had coordinating but not matching shirts. We were just nice humans to all of the employees in the terminal. They're not gonna pick kids that are throwing tantrums on the floor. Luckily, my kids were well behaved on both of these days. And yeah, we just interact and talk to the cast members and help other families out, take their pictures, whatever. Like, we try to be nice on vacation anyway, but it doesn't hurt your chances in getting selected as Family of the Day either.
That's awesome. And then what do you, besides boarding the ship first and starting that and getting your photo opportunity with Captain Mickey, what else is involved in that?
Yeah, so this differed a little bit between the Wonder and the Dream. The Wonder, we got our picture taken, we boarded, there was no Captain Mickey, we just boarded. This was still when they were doing virtual muster, so we got to do that very first thing. Then we were the first family in cabanas, made the whole day very easy. Nothing really beyond that. For the Dream, it was much more of a production. We had to go and take pictures. We had to come back and get a signed certificate about being the family of the day. Then we had to go get more pictures taken with the certificate. Then we had to come back. We had to get announced to the terminal, wave, wave, smile, smile. Then we had to get actually on board the ship. This cast member stays with you the entire time while you do this. And so you get on the ship, they announce you as Family of the Day. They announce every family as they get on, but you're announced as the Family of the Day. On the Dream, Captain Mickey is standing at the base of the stairs with his arms open wide, and your children are encouraged to just run to him. So obviously, like, the tears were flowing at this point. And those photographers, I'm of course taking video and pictures of my kids running towards Mickey, and the photographers are taking pictures of me crying. I'm like, that's not the memory I need captured, but thank you. And then Captain Mickey let the girls walk him over to a spot where they took pictures, and so you get pictures of the holding hands. And then we did the sit down lunch that time instead of going up to cabanas. So you get a little memory, and then usually that same cast member is watching for you when you disembark on the last day of the cruise and asks you how everything went, etc.
Do they include the pictures for you, or do you have to have the picture or the? You
have to have the package. So we purchased the photo package for the Marvel cruise, not for our one on the Wonder. So yes, you don't get the pictures unless you purchase them still. Yeah.
Good to know.
They're not included.
Yeah.
So let's stick with some basic things, because I got a bunch of other questions I want to get before we get to the end of it. But what kind of cabin do you guys pick with a family of 4? What do you guys tend to go towards?
I love this question. Almost always, I struggle with seasickness, and our children are light sleepers. So we almost always opt for deck 2. when we can. It's enough space for us. We're generally not in the cabin unless we're sleeping, and we haven't felt the need for a veranda. So it's quiet down on deck 2. It's less motion for me. We like deck 2. This one, I had originally booked deck 2. We used the Disney Plus deal to book this cruise. It also helped. We're big fans of Southwest Airlines, and they had a free promotional companion pass for January through March. And so we could fly the girls for free to Miami, and we got the girls, quote unquote, free on the cruise. So incredible deal, which is why we booked it. And about 3 weeks before the cruise, they released some more promotions on top of the Disney Plus deal. And so they weren't VGT or OGT, but they were the guarantee rooms, and they were a certain percentage off. And you could use the Disney Plus deal, which was buy 2, get 2 free. So we upgraded. I had my travel agent from Touring Plans upgrade us to a guarantee veranda room, and I upgraded to a 4C, which would have been on deck 7, sort of midship. So that's the deluxe family ocean view stateroom with veranda. So it has the extra space, it has the circular tub. When we got assigned our room, which wasn't until 2 days before sailing, so that was for a planner like me, this gave me a lot of heartache. I also did it as a surprise to my family. So I had no one to share the heartache with me of like, I don't know what our stateroom will be. We were doing fish extenders. My group didn't know where our stateroom would be. It turned out fine. So it got assigned and we got a 4A. So we ended up being on deck 10, midship, almost right behind. We were 10068 was our stateroom. If you look at the Disney Dream, we were right by the midship elevators, essentially right under funnel vision. And so we could pop up and get ice cream and go to cabanas. That was really nice. Very much enjoyed the veranda, very much enjoyed the shower and the extra space that gave us. Otherwise, we didn't really need the extra space, and the motion and the noise did get to us more this cruise than others, especially deck chairs would wake my kids up in the morning as they were setting those up. So we would probably, we got upgraded, so that was good. If in the future I went back to booking veranda rooms, I would probably make sure I wasn't on that top deck just for my family's preference, maybe deck 7 or something similar. But we also don't mind just the ocean view staterooms low either. Might change when my kids get bigger. They're nice and compact for now.
That is the trouble or the struggle, right? With the guaranteed cabins is yes. You could be under the pool deck, which some people love the convenience of popping up
yes.
to get to cabanas so quickly and to get drinks at the beverage station on the pool deck. But yes, there's almost always chairs, sounds moving
right
when you're up there. And even if you have all the sound machines on, and even if you're heavy sleepers, it still pops through.
It's still, especially the kid that was in the bunk bed right under that deck. Those, the deck chairs were what got her every morning. Oh, well.
That happened to us on our second cruise. They put us on deck 8 on the Magic, and we're right underneath the deck there too as well. So something to think about for those of you out there booking the floor right below the pool decks. We didn't really talk about it, but this cruise it was a 5-day cruise. Marvel Day at Sea left. First day you had Castaway, then you had Marvel Day, Cozumel, Day at Sea, which I love. I love that sea day before you get off at the end, and then back to Miami. Well, let's turn to the Marvel Day at Sea. A couple questions here. First, is your family a huge Marvel family? Are you guys, was this one of the reasons why you wanted to go on this cruise? And then, with planning ahead of time, what were you able to plan ahead of time since it was kind of delayed as far as what you were, hoping to be able to do? What were you able to plan ahead of time, and how did you use that strategy to spend your day?
So my husband and I are big Marvel fans. We've seen every MCU entry that exists so far. But really, we booked the cruise because of the Disney Plus deal, and it just happened to be Marvel Day at Sea. So this was good. It also helped my younger daughter, Louise, who is 4, is obsessed with Spider-Man. Very big Spider-Man fan. And we had expected that on the Wonder, even on non-Marvel sailings, and especially on ships like the Wonder that have the Avengers piece of the Kids Club, they usually host Avengers Academy several times throughout the cruise. Typically, Spider-Man is one of the Avengers that shows up during those training sessions. So we were hoping, preparing that she could meet Spider-Man on that cruise. She didn't. It was explained to us that he was off saving the world. Totally understandable, busy guy. So we were very much looking forward to actually guaranteeing that she would meet Spider-Man on this cruise. But really, probably mostly for me more than anyone else, was the Marvel cruise booked, and were we excited for it. So that's sort of why we booked. Yes, big Marvel fan, at least personally. What were we able to plan for in advance? Not much. So this is the first season that Marvel Day at Sea is on the Dream. This was the second sailing that it had happened. Apparently, there were quite a few people that had done back-to-back, done the first and the second sailing. The first one did not go smoothly at all. So that's another good planning note. If you want to try the first ever of something, it takes time to work out the kinks. So by the second sailing, everything was really smooth, I felt, but the first sailing was not quite as much. What we were able to figure out in advance were the character greetings that you can reserve in advance. So like on a regular Disney cruise where you have the royal gatherings, it's free, you sign up 30 days before your embarkation date for a time, and you get to meet typically 4 princesses. Marvel Day at Sea, they have something similar, except you pick specific characters and a time, and you reserve your time. There was some interestingness around this. You were only supposed to be able to book 1 out of the 3. There were 3 that were offered, but very quickly on that 30-day, the night before, 30 days before embarkation, everyone on our cruise figured out you could book as many as you want. And so that happened, and they were all gone by about 2 a.m. So it opened at midnight. They were gone. All 3 of them were gone by about 2 a.m. They reserved some for on the ship, so people did get to book those. They're also worded very carefully to safeguard against which characters might be there or might not in case they have to go save the world. So there was Heroic Encounters, that's what these are called, Heroic Encounters Headquarters, which very heavily implied that you would get to meet Spider-Man and Iron Man. Then there was Heroic Encounters Asgard, which only implied that you would get to meet Thor. And then there was Heroic Encounters Guardians, which only implied that you would get to meet Groot. And again, none of these names was specifically mentioned, but that's what you could figure out. And so we booked all 3 for all 4 members of our family. That tripped up a couple of people. They thought it was like the photo package, and if you booked 1 member of your family, everyone got to go. Not true. Everyone needs to be booked into it. And we booked Spider-Man and Iron Man first, pretty early in the morning, not too early, so we could take advantage of other lines not by being long early in the morning, and then Asgard, and then Guardians just after lunch. So we knew those were sort of our anchors. We couldn't move them because then everything else was sold out. I got on board and immediately started asking photographers which characters had the longest lines during the first sailing. They all had different answers. So photographers, maybe not the best source of information. The consensus seemed to be Groot, which on our sailing was not true. So we had those as our anchors. Really couldn't plan anything else. That was about it. Other than we knew that the big deck show would happen after both dinner seatings. And so us with young kids and having early port adventures at Cozumel the next day, we knew our kids weren't going to go see that deck show, unfortunately. And so we figured out, we sort of did rock, paper, scissors on whether my husband and I would get to attend. So I got to attend. He stayed in the stateroom with the kids. It's okay. He got to see Avatar the night before, which is what he wanted to do. There you go. So that's what we were able to figure out in advance, which didn't feel like much given all of the offerings that day. For
people who couldn't book those encounters with the characters, did those characters just happen to possibly randomly walk around the ship so people could get an opportunity to meet them as well?
No. So there were tons of characters randomly roaming the ships, but the ones that had the reserved encounters did not. So it ended up being that there were more characters in those reserved encounters than what was promised. Spider-Man and Iron Man were there. They weren't anywhere else on the ship other than the main deck show later that night. In Asgard, it was Thor and Mighty Thor, who is Jane Foster, or sometimes they switched out with Loki if they needed a break. Again, you couldn't see those characters anywhere else. And then we had Groot with Star-Lord, and you don't see them anywhere else.
Okay. And being a Marvel fan as you are, as your husband, we've had everybody has like a different opinion of what they expect out of a Marvel day at sea. Did it meet your needs?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes. Especially with everything that was offered, I got to choose the things. I wish I could have done more. I think that was my one takeaway. I wish it was a full Marvel cruise, right? And maybe not so much packed into one day. Totally understand why they can't do that. So logistically, not the whole thing can be Marvel. There was just too much. And so even me who goes into a day like that, knowing and understanding that we can't do everything and being theoretically okay with it, I still wanted to do more things that I didn't get to do. Drawing classes, trivia, those were the things that fell by the wayside. Instead, we did characters and shows, etc.
We don't have a lot of time today because of everybody's schedule. So I want to make sure we cover some tips regarding how to spend that Marvel day at sea. And if it was a Marvel day versus Pixar day versus whatever other day at sea there is. So maybe a few minutes of tips on how to maximize that. And then we'll go into tips on maximizing the rest of the cruise as well.
Sure. So maximizing your Marvel day at sea or Pixar or whatever. I hope they bring Star Wars back eventually. I would love to do that one too. The biggest one that we learned a little bit later in the day was any of those non-reserved characters. So there's sort of 3 buckets of characters. There's the reserved ones and the heroic encounters. There are the characters that have scheduled meet and greets, and there's a set number of them. Those were T'Challa and Shuri. They met in Preludes. Miss Marvel and Shang-Chi met in the lobby atrium, switched off, and then in Evolution, in the back of the ship, there was Sam Wilson, Steve Rogers, and Captain Marvel. So those were the only scheduled meet and greets that happened. They and the non-scheduled characters, the sort of random roaming the ship characters, would all roam in the 3 levels of that lobby atrium throughout the day. And pseudo-randomly, right? But there was always at least one of them, either on deck 3, 4, or 5 in that lobby area. And so had we known this would have saved us a lot of time. The way we started our day was we went to the very first Miss Marvel meet. We showed up about 10 minutes early, only had to wait 5 minutes, then hopped to Captain Marvel. By the time we hopped to Captain Marvel, she already had a good 45-minute wait. Thankfully, I had sent my husband ahead. He didn't care about meeting Miss Marvel, so he was in line for us. We only waited about 25 of those 45 minutes. He did the rest of the waiting for us. And so in that Miss Marvel, Sam Wilson, Steve Rogers, that averaged about an hour all day long. That line was totally winding, almost to midship. And yet, later in the day, you could see Captain Marvel up on deck 5, just staring down at deck 3 with no one around her, like very obviously looking for someone to interact with. And so this clicked in my head very quickly. We shouldn't be waiting in any more lines. Let's just hang out in the lobby and we'll walk up and see who we can find. So all of those characters randomly showed up in the lobby throughout the day. In addition to them, you could find Black Widow, Hawkeye, Kate Bishop, Doctor Strange, the Tracksuit Mafia, who I originally thought were just guests dressed up. No, they were actual characters. All of these just wandering occasionally, usually one of them, sometimes 2 of them. Number 1 hack to maximize your day is to just not wait in those lines, especially if you don't have the photo package anyway, and just interact with characters that way. The other is that there are multiple showings of Warriors of Wakanda. So that's when Okoye comes and trains everyone to be warriors, again, in that lobby. The middle ones are definitely the least crowded. I went to the first showing and the third showing, and the first show was the most crowded by far. Similarly, in the Walt Disney Theater, they have Strange Academy, which is sort of the big production of the day, and the middle one is the least crowded. So if you want to avoid those waits, just avoid the first of anything and the last of anything and play with your wait times that way. That was the way we were able to maximize. We also figured out we could split parties occasionally. So like those heroic encounters, Spider-Man and Iron Man, despite having timed reserve waits, still had about a 45-minute line. So we would leave one parent in line, use that Navigator app to chat each other. Other parent would go take kids. That way our kids don't get tired and cranky. as much. They still did. And we could sort of split up and experience more things that way as well. So that's how I would maximize your Marvel Day at Sea specifically.
My guess is it would probably work for Pixar Day at Sea as well.
Yes,
I mean, not that we know that for sure, but I'm sure that they have kind of similar strategies with the characters.
Agree.
So, Becky, your Instagram, as we've talked about, is like widely geared towards maximizing whatever the situation is, like maximizing Walt Disney World, different events. So I think I'm going to stick to that topic for this episode because, again, we have limited time. What strategies would you have for those with kids to maximize the kids clubs for them?
Yeah, very, very important. And what we make sure to not miss are the open houses on the very first day. If your kids are like mine, one of my kids would gladly just go and leave her family behind and be perfectly happy for the whole cruise. The other wants parent time all the time. She's our sort of early pandemic baby. She was 1 when the pandemic hit. So she's attached, right? Totally not her fault. So those open houses are key because we got to go acclimate them to that space while we were with them. And we actually attended at least one other open house during the cruise as well, so that she could see this is fun. I can feel safe while I'm having fun. It gets them introduced to a few of those cast members that are going to be in there. So then when we want them to go to the kids club, there's at least not active resistance, typically. So maximizing that time. Otherwise, we would look in the Navigator app and make sure that they were there about 15 to 30 minutes before any activities that they wanted to do. So there's several really cool activities in the kids club. Every cruise, there's a pajama party. One usually happens late at night. They usually repeat it in the middle of the afternoon for kids that actually sleep. They get to make pillowcases and bring them home. That's a really cool one. But everyone knows that sounds really cool, and everyone shows up about 5 minutes beforehand, and that line to check them in gets really long. So making sure that you show up a little bit before that, they can have some fun. There'll be a big announcement in the kids club, and you can say when you drop them off, they're here for the pajama party. Can you make sure they get there? Because those kids clubs are big. So that's how I would maximize that kids club time, and then make sure that you have some fun adult activities booked while they're in that kids club too.
And let me point out with the kids club, like, especially it does not work on the Wish because there's one kids club entrance spot, but at the other clubs, there are 2 locations. And because we're not doing pandemic pickup and drop offs anymore at one location, you can go to either.
Yes,
so
very good
if
point.
there is a line at one, you need to pick up or you need to drop off, go to the other entrance and then pick up or drop off there.
Especially for those activities. If it says it's happening in the Oceaneers Club, go to the Oceaneers Lab drop off and let your kid walk behind the scenes to get to the other one, because everyone will read in the app it's at the club and drop their kids off at the club.
So Becky, one of the main reasons we love the ships, but one of the main reasons our family likes to travel with Disney Cruise Line is to see places around the world. So what strategies do you have for port adventures?
Yeah, it varies according to the port. And our last 2 cruises, we did do Disney-owned port adventures. On our November 2019 cruise, we did Out on Our Own. That was a repositioning cruise on the Magic that only stopped in Antigua, and we did an adventure on our own in Antigua. But my tip, especially for people with young kids, and especially for first-time cruisers or newbie-ish cruisers, is to just go with the convenience of going through Disney. But there's still a strategy there. Especially if you're in a foreign country, that's hard with little kids. And on this cruise, what our kids ended up loving the most, since we had 2 port days, Castaway Cay and Cozumel, and we have 2 kids, in each port, we sort of split up and did a one-on-one date with each kid and then swapped kids for the next port. So I was with Louise in Castaway Cay for a port adventure, and then I got Edith in Cozumel, and that was really special. So that I recommend that to sort of these 2 and 2 parents, 2 kid families. That can be something special. We booked the earliest port adventures that left during the day. This is especially important in tendering ports where you can't dock directly. Now, Castaway Cay and Cozumel, we could dock directly. Cabo was a tendering port. That's where we went last November. So really important there to book early port adventures, because the folks that book through Disney get the first access to those tender boats, can get off the boat first, even in those other spots. And so that let us take most advantage of those ports. So if your ship happens to run behind, which it did on this cruise, we had to stop several times for migrant ships, which is becoming an increasing problem that you might run into, especially if you're there sort of along the Cuba coast. Since we were running behind, we were late to dock in our ports, so you're having less time in your ports anyway. So by booking through Disney, you at least guarantee yourself that you're going to get as much time as you can. You're going to be the earliest ones off the ship. It's more expensive, but typically a safer bet. So that's what I tend to recommend, especially for young kids in foreign ports.
I like the idea of having, splitting the kids up, because we've had to do that just because our kids' ages they're 4 years apart. And so there's some things when Alex, our youngest, he just couldn't do. So he and I did port excursions by ourselves. And then my wife and older son went diving, which is cool. And great tip on the tender port for those of you going to Europe this summer, Santorini, if that's in your wheelhouse, it's kind of a short time there anyways. I would recommend that as well if you can get off on one of the earliest port excursions, because they're going to get the priorities of the tenders in Santorini as well. And I know that's one specific thing. Food. You want to talk about food, Christy?
Yeah. What are your tips for strategizing eating and dining on Disney Cruise Line?
Just know that you're in charge. I think that's the most important thing, especially with young kids that can sometimes choose to be picky. My youngest does that occasionally. She's a pretty adventurous eater, but she'll randomly decide that she only wants one thing, and that thing only. We'd always do main dining with our kids. They would just be too tired and cranky, although I know quite a few parents like doing the opposite so that they can see the entertainment and then keep them awake with food and then just crash afterwards. So we do main dining. We show up about 10 minutes before the dining rotation starts so that we're typically one of the first 5 families into the restaurant. Always service on Disney Cruise Line is a little slower. This made a lot of families, first-time cruisers on our cruise, very upset that dinner was taking multiple hours. A, that's just going to be something that happens. B, we've been enough times now where on the very first night we tell our service team that we appreciate going quickly, and that's our priority, and they will do everything they can to make that happen. There's still certain constraints that they have to work around, but they can do that. Then I just say the world's your oyster, right? Our 4-year-old decided she only wanted to eat steak on this cruise. Moreover, she only wanted to eat medium rare steak. Turns out you really can't order that on the kids menu, even though there's typically a kids steak option. They can't do it medium rare. It requires like 4 people to intervene in the process. So we just ordered our 4-year-old the adult steak option every night. And that's okay. And that's a thing. And they can get it out to her pretty quickly. She also likes peas above all other vegetable. And so we would usually get a giant bowl of peas because that is not something that's in their normal rotation, just for her. Kept her happy, kept us more relaxed. And as adults, making decisions is hard for me and my family, especially about what we want to eat. Just know that you don't have to only order one entree, etc. I believe on our Royal Palace night, we ordered every possible appetizer and entree and shared them with our girls. And our girls got to try lamb and duck and things they would never otherwise eat. And we wouldn't order for them on land, but we all got to try it and we all got to eat it. And we did finish at least all the proteins. So hooray for not much waste. But just know that you can tweak things and you don't have to be stuck and complain about this one specific thing. I, for example, really don't like the Animator's palette menu. It's fine. So I order a triple portion of the pasta per sets. That's an appetizer, but I order triple portion as my entree. And they can do that. Ask and you shall receive. So that's my dining strategy. Interestingly, the Marvel menu has many more options than the normal menus. We were talking 10 or 12 entrees that you could pick from. They also have specialty drinks. We ordered the non-alcoholic specialty drink on Marvel night. I don't recommend that one, but you do get a cool cup. So there's that. But yeah, specialty drinks are expensive. Keep that in mind.
Yes, they are. Really, what are they going to do with that cup when they get home?
Right.
So they're not going to do anything with it. Yeah. Well, look, that's a giant cup.
It is. This is the Wakanda Forever. And
it is giant for the people listening, which is everybody.
Yes.
But yeah, it is
bigger than my head.
I was just going to say it's bigger than Becky's head.
So before we finish up, I have one other question. You've been on the Magic, the Wonder, and the other ships as well?
Dream.
So Magic, Wonder, and Dream. We have not yet been on the
Fantasy. What data differences do you see whether you're sailing on a classic ship versus a Dream class ship? Is there anything in that angle?
Just everything takes longer on the big ships because there are more people. So like our Marvel Day at Sea cruise was at 98% capacity. With that come lines, and you have to expect that. And so just building that in. So on the Wonder in November, we would get to regular character meet and greets within 5 minutes before they opened. On the Dream, you had to be there 10 or 15 minutes before they opened, unless you wanted just a really long wait. And so that sort of multiplication of everything on the big ships is really what you have to pay attention to.
That's true. And it kind of works for trivia, if you want to go do trivia or any type of onboard activities as well, to get there a little bit earlier.
We never won trivia on the Wonder, and then we won our first trivia on the Dream, even though there were a ton more people. So
congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. It was great. It was just regular Disney trivia. It was on Embarkation Day, which was the most magical day, and we got a perfect score. So that was exciting.
That's a tough trivia want to win too. So,
I know.
Becky, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to touch on?
The only thing I will say, because I get a lot of people asking this question on Instagram, is especially with young kids, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, if you want to give them a Disney vacation, cruising is the way to do it. So much harder to do the parks. Yes, lovely, magical. I love the parks. That's what I write about most often. A cruise, you're always within walking distance to your room. You can go nap them whenever you want. You can get any food they want, and you don't have to reorder 2 entrees because they changed their mind. So much easier. Then once they get to that 4, 5, 6 range, yeah, sure, take them to the parks. They're a little more self-sufficient at that point. But I highly recommend cruising for especially those young kiddos.
I love that. Just remember that young kids that are not potty trained cannot swim in the pools, but there is a splash pad that they can utilize. Somebody was just complaining about that on Instagram, and I was like, well, if you used a travel agent, they would have told you.
Yes, those splash pads are cool too.
The splash pads are great, especially I will say on the Wonder and the Magic, they're a little lackluster, but the rest of the ships are amazing. Okay, Becky, really quick, one more time, where can people find you online?
So if you go to the touringplans.com blog, I blog there. My blogs typically drop on Wednesdays, or you can find me at Raising Mini-Me's, Minnie like Minnie Mouse, on Instagram.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me. Had a great time.
Thanks, Becky. All the best to you. And where can people find you next? Where are you headed next?
Good question. Where I'm heading next is Colorado to teach my kids to ski in March. And then we're going to take a national parks road trip this summer to undetermined parks as of yet. And we'll see when we get back to Disney. I'm hoping for an adults trip, like Riviera Resort, maybe. We'll see.
I love that adults trip and skiing with the family. Nothing better. Our family skis together and we enjoy it. So once again, thanks so much, Becky, for coming on. It was just a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Becky for coming on and sharing all of her experiences sailing with Disney Cruise Line, all of her tips and tricks to maximize your experiences when you're sailing with DCL. Once again, you can follow her over at Touring Plans on YouTube, also over on Touring Plans website where she writes a blog, Touring Plans Teaches, and of course you can follow her on Instagram for her family's tips and tricks when she's sailing on Disney Cruise Line and in the parks as well at Raising Mini-Me's. You can find these links in the show notes. Well, as always, we'd like to give a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters. They help bring you this show each and every week ad-free. If you'd like to find out how you can support our show, you can go to patreon.com/DCL podcast and find out all the information there. If you have time to leave us an iTunes review, that helps us get the word out about our show a little bit better in the Disney cruising, the Disney podcasting, and just the cruising podcasting community in general. We want to thank each and every one of you who've taken the time to do that. Well, if you're headed out on a Disney cruise at Adventures by Disney Adventure, headed out to the parks, or just getting prepared for Princess Weekend down there for everybody down at Walt Disney World, running with Run Disney, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, all of us here at the DCL Podcast, we want to wish you to be well, enjoy time with family and friends, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.